My name is David Reinprecht. I grew up in Austria. I'm here since 2001. I'm a functional nutritionist. I studied functional medicine. I'm a biohacker, which means I do all the crazy things, on myself to see what works and what doesn't work, which doesn't always go well. And I'm also like a longevity coach and a master trainer, which means I help people live a longer and a healthier life. It used to be science fiction that, anti-aging doesn't work and everything, but I can tell you we're about 10 years away to completely reverse aging. We've done it already in animals with, there's so many things with CRISPR, gene therapy. There's so many good supplements now to extend, lives, even with animals. I can talk about this for hours, but yeah, it's not science fiction anymore. Just to let you guys know, longevity, has become reality, and it's a booming business. I think this year so far, it's like a $300 or $400 billion business a year, and it's growing every year. All right, so as Ryan said, my first book was From Chubby Kid to Longevity Hero, which basically is my journey, how everything started. To give you a little intro, I got into nutrition and fitness and everything very early. I was 13 years old. Long story short, I had a crush on a girl in my class, but I was too shy. But I was too shy to go up to her. So I wrote a little, note, and then when I wrote it, I was still too shy to give it to her. So I was like hiding it on my desk. My classmates exposed me. They gave it to her, and at first she was all happy. Oh, who wrote it? Who wrote it? And when she found out it came for me, she came up to me. She looked at me. She said, "Did you write this?" And I was all nervous. I'm like, She goes, "Where do you think I'm gonna go with you? Look at you. You're fat." And that was the beginning of my career. Because from that moment on, I wanted to know everything about nutrition. I cannot tell you how many books I was reading over the years. And then, of course, in college, it was easy to pick a topic, which was nutrition science. And so on. And in this book, my entire journey, is in there, and all the longevity tips. So if you want to live a healthier and a longer life, all the longevity supplements that actually work according to science, it's all in this book. And my second book I just released like 2.5 weeks ago, is a bestseller on Amazon. And my talk is basically based on this also. And it's just perfect timing because America's food pandemic, the hidden crisis, speaks about, well, let me put it this way. America has the title as the sickest country in the world. We have the sickest children, chronic diseases goes up every year. We have 2 million cases, every year in cancer, and it just goes on and on. And it all can be traced back on what I show you today. And this book speaks about all that stuff, the GMOs, the microplastic, the chemicals in our water system, and so on. And so let's get started. Okay, so before we start about nutrition, I want to give you guys a little intro. Like, how did we get that title as the sickest country in the world? Well, let's go back to the 80s. In the 80s, tobacco companies such as Archer Reynolds and Philip Morris, if you remember in the 80s, that's when all the lawsuits happened, right? And the government came out and told the people, hey, smoking is bad for you, get cancer and heart disease. And for some reason, people actually listened and stopped smoking. As a result, they lost billions of dollars, and they had to come up with an idea. Now, from a company point of view, they came up with a genius idea. For us consumers, not so much, because they applied the same principles and they used the same scientists to get you hooked and addicted, like this on cigarettes, and applied the same principle on food. And that was the creation of the ultra-processed food, which dominates the market today. 70% of Americans eat some shape and form of processed food every single day. They created the bliss point. Does anybody know what the bliss point is? Bliss point is they found out the perfect ratio of sugar, salt, and fat. When you consume that, it releases dopamine. In the same way like smoking cigarettes, doing cocaine, or drinking alcohol, they apply it to the food. And that's why it's so hard if you have been eating, processed food for a long time. That's why it's so hard to get off that, and start a diet. And a lot of people fail because it's a real addiction. It's not just a metaphor, it's real addiction. And the lobbying power we have to mention too. The food industry spends 5 times more than the oil industry. And they paid off the FDA, the USDA, and many academic institutions to overlook the harmful effects of processed food. And as a result, because of the corruption in this country, we ended up with a food pyramid like this. when this came out, I mean, every influencer, talked about this because they couldn't believe that this is actually, real. Can anybody tell me, like, what's wrong with this picture? Or what they all have in common? This is not a food pyramid, for health. This is a advertising company for processed food company. This is so obvious wrong. Like 90% of everything on here is ultra processed. If you would eat this every single day, I can promise you, you will end up with type 2 diabetes and chronic diseases. 100% without a doubt. Let's go over it a little bit. First, we have watermelon. Yes, it can be natural, but if you eat watermelon, which is high sugar, in combination with this, it's not going to help you. And then we have kale. Who thinks that kale is a superfood? Not anymore. Kale is actually not so super because we found out they're so high in those plant chemicals such oxalates. If you have joint pains and you consume kale, it inflames it even more. Then we have frosted mini wheats, unsweetened almond mix, non-fat frozen yogurt, chocolate covered almonds, orange juice with calcium, honey nut, and on. So everything is processed. Now, however, I want to say something about when you see like orange juice, apple juice, when it says vitamins added or fortified or enriched, what that means is they add synthetic vitamins. Does anybody know about the MTHFR gene mutation? Have you heard of that? 44% of Americans have the gene mutation called the MTHFR. So that means you or the person next to you might have it and you're not even aware of it. When you have the MTHFR gene mutation, you cannot make, the conversion, from, as an example, folic acid to 5-methylfolate. I'll give you an example to make it easier to explain. Imagine I take the crude oil out of the ground and I put that in the gas tank. The car cannot recognize it, right? Because it needs to be refined. And in humans, that refinery we call methylation. And that gene, is responsible for methylating everything in the usable form. And if that gene is broken, and if it's red, it doesn't work at all. If it's yellow, half of the time, then you cannot consume some of the synthetic vitamins because you cannot make the conversion. Folic acid, I know most doctors tell you, oh, folic acid is so great, you consume it. But folic acid is made in a lab. You cannot find it anywhere in nature. The natural form of folic acid is 5-methylfolate. You can buy it in supplement form, and it's maybe $1, $2, more expensive. Now, if you don't have the gene mutation, you don't have to worry about folic acid. Your body can make the conversion, but if you do, you're in trouble. Research has shown when folic acid starts accumulating because you cannot convert it, it can cause cancer, especially prostate cancer in men, and many other health issues. I can actually give you a real life example. People, especially kids, when they have the gene mutation, it can cause ADHD, ADD, anxiety. I'm not talking about anxiety like you're watching TV and all of a sudden you get an anxiety attack and you don't know what's coming from. Depression, mood swings, even autism. Many times, we they get diagnosed with autism, but really it's a methylation issue. And a family came to me about 8 months ago. Make a long story short, the kids, got diagnosed with ADHD. The mom noticed that every morning, they would get ready for school. They would drink the orange juice, and remember, orange juice, folic acid, or synthetic vitamins, and then the cereal, again, folic acid, or the synthetic vitamins. She didn't know that the kid had those genes broken. So what happens is, it acted like cocaine for the kid. The kid was all over the place. It turned to a wrestling match to get the kid in school. And luckily, one day, they were running late for school. And she noticed, wait a minute, the kid is normal today. How is that possible? So make a long story short, again, they got referred to me. She told me the story, and I'm like, well, it sounds like the kid could have the MTHFR gene mutation. Sure enough, we did the gene test, and the COMP gene and the MTHFR were yellow and red, which means it didn't function. So we had to remove all the folic acid from the diet, everything organic and stuff, because here in America, we do something really stupid. Since the 1930s, we spray everything with folic acid. Anything that's fortified, enriched, which is like all the rice and all the wheat products, since 1930s. And maybe back then it was a good idea because, around the war, people had nutrient deficiency and everything. But we know today that half of the population has this gene mutation, and we're still doing it. Now, here's the paradox. The same company that's spraying the folic acid on our food supply is the same company that sells Adderall, which is Monsanto. Just saying. You just connect the dots. And and the kid, after 5-6 days, the kid was back to normal. We removed the folic acid. We gave the kid methylated supplements that already converted because he could make the conversion. And sure enough, a few days later, kid was, normal. And that's how fast it goes, with many things. But I think after this talk, we'll get a good idea. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on here because we have a lot to talk about, but I think you get the picture here. And so if you follow this corrupt food pyramid, we're going to end up with chronic diseases. 75% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. That's 6 in 10. 4 in 10 have multiple chronic diseases. If you ever asked yourself this question, why we had the highest COVID death, in the world, is because of this, because so many people already had multiple chronic diseases. So if a virus comes along, it doesn't take much. 70% of all deaths in America are caused by chronic diseases: diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, and so on. And that's also something we have to mention, the healthcare spending. Last year, we spent $4.7 trillion. If you calculate it, if you boil it down, that's approximately $14,200 for every American per year. That's how much we spend. Imagine we could save all that money and use it for something, better than this. It's projected to go up to $7.5 trillion, which is 20% of our nation's GDP. Okay, so now I ask you a question. You see here, from 2000 up, it plateaus a little bit here in 2010 and straight up. We have the best healthcare system, right? We got the best medication. We got the best doctors. Then how do you explain this? Then why do we get sicker every single year? Something is up in this country, and I don't know, I guess people don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it today because it can all be traced back to this. The chemicals in our food supply. All right, so here in America, we have way over 10,000 additives, pesticides in our food supply. To put that in perspective, in Europe, where I'm from, we have less than 400. And how many times did you hear that? Or maybe even you went through this experience. Oh, I go to Europe, I go to Italy, I eat pizza and bread, I feel good, I lose weight, I don't know why, I come back here, I feel like shit. Well, it's because we don't have all that stuff in here. Common additives are preservatives. There's an old saying, preservatives is basically to increase the shelf life. Any product that has increased the shelf life will shorten yours. And then, artificial sweetener, thank God, some of the artificial sweetener and colorants have been taken out or will be taken out next year. I hope it's going to happen. Red 40, yellow 60, and all that stuff. And emulsifiers, which are chemicals that help to bind products. If it's a water-based and oil-based product, doesn't bind, right? But no worries, with the chemicals, perfect. And then herbicides, glyphosate, also known as Roundup. Now keep in mind, this is banned in most countries, and if it's not banned, it's heavily regulated. But here in America, we spray over 250 million pounds every single year on our crops. And have you seen how they spray, the crops? Those individuals like running around in a full-on hazard suit, spraying that poison. Why does he have a hazard suit on? Are we eating this? Does this make any sense? I know people not asking those questions. And and then on top of that, it ends up in our water supply, in the air, and in the soil. And the problem is, it kills the bacteria in the soil. And that's why our plants, have less nutritious, like than 50 years ago. You have to eat 5 apples today to get the same amount of vitamins and minerals than 50 years ago, where you only had to eat 1. And now this is an interesting one. There's an herbicide called Additives, which is banned in Europe. You can actually look up the study. Okay, so they were doing a study to see, what it does to male frogs. because we know that, glyphosates and stuff like that, they're, hormone disruptor. But estrogen turned male frogs to female frogs. It chemically castrated the frogs, and they had female organ growing. Now, just think about what I just said. And we're spraying this on our crops. Now, what do you think is going to happen if we humans get exposed to this year after year after year? Here in America, we have something going on, which is also a rise of transgenderism. Nothing against them. I really don't care. But why is it happening here and not other countries? Well, could that have something to do with that? And then GMO. 90% of all the crops in America are genetically modified. Corn, soybeans, canola, cotton, sugar beets, alfalfa, potatoes, and so on. Now, you might say, what's wrong with GMO? There have been many studies, and that's deemed to be safe. They have the same, minerals and vitamin contents. What's wrong with it? Well, then ask yourself this question: why is it illegal in Europe? And in Russia, it's not just illegal. You go to jail for 20 years. If it's that healthy and there's no side effects, why is America one of these? I think it's the only country that allows genetically modified crops. Well, it all goes back to a study in France. Here in America, they did a few studies, but they only went on for 3 months. They fed the mice and the rats with the genetically modified crops. After 3 months, there's no side effects. It's okay. It's safe. However, the same study has been conducted in France, and you can look it up. That study went on for 2 years. And interestingly, after 9 months, 10 months, around that time, most of the rats and the mice had tumors growing the size of tennis balls. And that's one of the main reasons why it's illegal in other countries, but not here. All right, so we have more. Let's talk about some more food chemicals. All right, so we talked about the preservatives and the additives, right? But they also mess up your healthy gut bacteria. Every disease starts in the gut. If your microbiome is out of balance, sooner or later you will get diseases, because this is like the gate, through heaven, which means everything, all the nutrient absorption, everything takes place here. And we have about 3 pounds, trillions and trillions of those microbes. I just call them the little bugs, in our gut. And if we keep them happy, they keep us healthy. And when pesticides and residues, gets into our stomach, think about this. The genetically modified plants so that the pesticides, the poison, doesn't kill the plant. So it builds resistance to the poison, so that the insects and the bugs don't even eat it or get killed if they do. So what do you think is going to happen when we eat that to our little bugs in here? Yeah, and then also artificial sweetener and dyes. They're linked to neurotoxicity and behavioral changes. They can literally influence the way you think or the way we behave. Seed oils, omega-6 fatty acids. How many times did you hear that? Oh, seed oils are so bad. It causes inflammation, everything. Anybody? Well, it's like a yes and a no. When we talk about seed oils, the omega-6 fatty acids, and there are in their natural form in like plants and seeds and nuts and stuff like that, that is fine. However, when we process it and it ends up in the shelf, in the bottle, that's where it becomes complicated, because we have to use such a chemical process to extract the oil from the seeds. Then we use bleach. We use a chemical to deodorize them because it's a little smell, and then we use a toxic chemical, hexane, to liquefy it, and then it ends up on the shelf. So you will learn today that a lot of that stuff, when doctors tell you, oh, red meat is bad for you, well, yeah, it can be, and so can be the omega-6. So it really depends. It all depends on how we treat the food. And then we have the plastic. I wrote a big chapter about this. The microplastic, the PPAs, the phthalates. I swear, if we don't get this under control in the next 20 years, that will be the end of us. Because so many women can't get pregnant no more, because they have so much microplastic in the placenta, in the eggs, like everything. Every baby born today has microplastic. Each of you guys, including myself, we all have microplastic in our tissue. I was reading a study, and they say on average, we consume about the size of a credit card on plastic every 2 to 3 weeks. However, 0.2, 0.5 of that, stays, in your system. So a lot of it comes out, but some of it gets in your tissue. Some of it even crosses the brain barrier, and that, can cause many other issues. And then we have, and plastic. That's another issue. It mimics estrogen. So whenever we have plastic in our tissues, estrogen goes up. Whenever estrogen goes up, testosterone goes down. That's a problem for men. Here in this country, we have another pandemic of low testosterone. Men lost 68% of its natural testosterone, over the last 60 years. I can't even tell you how many blood tests I was reading, the last 2 years. Those individuals were from like 18 to 30 years old. Their testosterone should be somewhere around like 800, 1500. But you know what I've seen? 280, 300, 400. I think the highest I saw was like 580. Devastating. And then we have MSG and high sodium. MSG you can find in every processed food. That's a chemical, many restaurants too. That's a chemical, that gets added to your food to make it taste better. It increases, the flavor. If there's a food that doesn't taste good, don't worry about it. MSG, perfect. And then high sodium. Like, again, sodium can be bad if it's, in processed food. That is like industrial, sodium that has no minerals, nothing, right? That can, increase water retention. When water retention, goes up, because our entire, arteries and veins and everything is a closed system. When pressure goes up, blood pressure goes up. So yes, with that kind of sodium, it can happen. However, when we talk about salt, Celtic salt, Baja salt, pink salt, these are like high minerals. They have like 85%, 90% of all minerals, right? They can actually help you. Somebody comes to me with high blood pressure, I actually give them the Celtic salt, because those minerals actually help to lower it and also help to balance out the blood glucose. And then we have synthetic flavor enhancer. They hijack the appetite to, well, I can actually give you a real story here. So have you noticed when you eat processed food, I'm talking about chips, I don't even know the processed food because I don't eat it, fast food and all that kind of stuff. Like, how easy is it to eat like 3,000, 5,000 calories? And after you finished, you're still not full. I can give you like a real life example. When I grew up in Austria, and I was like 14 years old, we only had one McDonald's about an hour and a half away. And we only went there about every 2 months or so. So you can imagine, when I had the chance to go there, I was eating. So, but I was surprised that I could eat at 14 years old 10 burgers, 4 Big Macs, Fish Macs, cheeseburger, fries, and everything. 10 of them. And what I noticed is I looked like a pregnant woman. I was so full, but I didn't get that satiety feeling that, I'm good. I didn't get that satisfaction. Little did I know that in processed food and also McDonald's, they have those secret sauces. They add chemicals that temporarily inhibit the leptin pathway. The leptin is a hormone that gets released from your fat that, when you eat and you're like, oh, I'm full, that's leptin. Sends a signal to the brain, say, hey, we have enough fat stored, stop eating. But when you eat processed food or fast food, you will notice you can eat and you don't get that. Try to eat sweet chips and then put it away. Good luck. And then we have inflammatory ingredients, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup. Well, my next topic is about sugar. It's going to blow your mind. But, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup is like sugar on steroids. Our bodies are not made for the amount of sugar we eat. In my opinion, that's my opinion, sugar is not for human consumption, period. And I'm going to show you why in a minute, and then you can be the judge. Now imagine to have sugar that's even, sweeter than regular sugar. Then we have hydrogenated oils. Those are basically oils that have been chemically altered, again, to increase the shelf life. Those trans fats, and everything, the fried food. Never eat fried food. That's just the worst, especially fried food at McDonald's or in the fast food restaurants, because they don't exchange the oil, every, I think they have to do it like every 2 or 3 days. In Europe, that's what the fries are actually better quality. Here, they add chemicals to the oil that cleans itself, so they only have to do it once a month. And then you consume that. Yeah, and then we have processed carbs, that spike insulin. Insulin also has a nickname as the fat storing hormone. When insulin is activated, forget about it. You cannot burn, fat. And when we talk about high glycemic carbs, which could be, white bread, pasta, bagel, anything with sugar, and if that gets activated, all the fat burning, is over with. And here's why. The body is a glucose burning machine. Let's just say your favorite ice cream is chocolate. No matter what you offer here, like, you will always get chocolate. That's how the body is with glucose. And only if glucose is not available, then the body will, burn fat. What is fat? Fat is nothing else than stored energy, like an emergency battery we have, right? And if something is an emergency battery, as the name already says, well, then I have to create an emergency. Back in the days, we had many emergencies, right? Because we didn't have to, food all the time. Now we have to mimic those, emergencies by fasting, eating less carbs. Sometimes you can eat more, the next day you eat less, that kind of like variety. But we're going to get to this, more in a little bit. All right, and also the toxin burden on the mitochondria. Yeah, when your mitochondria is full of toxin or is not working as it should, you can drink coffee, energy drinks as much as you want. You're going to feel tired, no energy. And then, of course, as a result, it's linked to sarcopenia, because who wants to go work out or walk or do anything if you're tired? And as a result, especially in the aging population, you're going to lose muscles. And as Ryan already said, what happens when you lose muscles? That's when things go down quick. Also can cause DNA damage, such as the telomeres, which speeds up biological aging. Now, the telomeres is basically the end cap, of the DNA that keeps you, DNA protected. It's the same way, like, the shoelaces, that keeps that, together. The telomere is basically kind of like that protects the DNA. And we used to like measure in longevity the length of the telomeres, to see your biological age or how many years you have left. Now we know it's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's still a great indicator. However, we found out that there's an enzyme called telomerase, which means with whole foods, certain vitamins and minerals, you can actually elongate the telomere again, which means you can, elongate your life. Okay, this is my favorite topic. If you're going to eat sugar after what I'm telling you now, then I don't know what to tell you. All right, before I start, don't believe me, don't believe your doctor, don't believe anybody. Just use your common sense. That's all I'm asking. Okay, let's go back in history. Let's go back 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, thousands of years. When did we ever eat the amount of sugar we do today? An average American consumes between 60 to 100 grams a day. That comes out per year to approximately 160 to 200 pounds. I'm 195 pounds. Look at this. That's how much sugar an average American eats. That is insane. And in my opinion, sugar, is one of the major culprits of all the chronic diseases today. And there's another interesting one. Glycation. I actually give an example which you never forget. Let's say you go to a steakhouse and you haven't eaten much, right? So you're low in calories. You eat your steak and the salad, and the waitress comes up to you. Oh, can I give you guys some dessert? And you're like, I didn't eat much today. Yeah, give me dessert. Okay, so what's going to happen? The protein and the fat, obviously from the steak, go in the blood. And so does the sugar from the dessert. What happens in the blood is the sugar binds with the proteins and the fats. They start glycating, malforming, if you will. And they create something we call AGEs, advanced glycation end products. They get deposited into your skin. They break down the collagen and they last, and you get sagging, wrinkling skin. Now, some people, told me, like last time, they're like, "Oh, I'm already old. I don't care, if I have wrinkles and everything." Okay, fair enough. However, keep in mind, we also have a skin that's called the epithelia that surrounds all your organs, your arteries, and everything, protected. That skin also gets affected by that. It can cause cancer, heart disease, and everything. Many health issues. You eat sugar every single day, your skin ages 7 times faster. And so many times I heard that before, I was like, oh, I have like bad genetics, that's why I have sagging skin. Well, there's no gene that determines that you're going to have sagging skin and at some point in your life. It's called glycation, when the collagen gets broken down. AGEs are all naturally already in food, so it's not just sugar. However, the way we cook our food, high heat, when you grill the steak or like the toast nice and brown, yeah, you increase AGEs. You can actually, there's a government website, you can actually look up. The government says we can have up to 15,000 AGEs per day. However, it sounds like a lot, right? But just to put in perspective, 2 bacon, fried bacon in the morning, just 2 stripes, has 82,000. And then you eat sugar and everything on top of that, and you're way up there. All right, so it also triggers chronic inflammation, which we know is the root cause of all the diseases. It's linked to Alzheimer and dementia. We have a name for it now, type 3 diabetes. I think I don't have to say nothing no more, right? The name already says it, type 3 diabetes. It's Alzheimer and dementia. So what does it tell you? It's sugar. If you eat sugar decade after decade without giving your insulin a little break, you can end up, now doesn't mean you have to, but the chance go up quite a bit. And then we call it type 3 diabetes. Especially in the aging population, I can tell you, I'm not going to eat sugar ever. I mean, I have not in my entire life. And my mom told me at like 12 years old, I don't know why I can't lose weight and I don't eat anything. And I remember she said, well, you're drinking soda, it has sugar. I'm like, has sugar? That was the last time I touched a soda. Right, and then it causes insulin resistance. I'm sure you heard that before, right? Insulin resistance is, we eat so much sugar, so much high glycemic carbs, right? Now imagine, every single day, 24/7, the pancreas releases insulin. The insulin is like the good cops and trying to take the glucose out, get it into the cell. And of course, we eat too much, and it goes into fat cells, and it stores it in the liver and all this stuff. Every single day, 24 hours. It's almost like if I go in the gym and I try to lift 300 pounds every single day without taking a break and not sleeping, the second day or third day, I'm going to be like, I can't do it no more. I have no energy. That's how the insulin feels like when we eat so much sugar every single day for years and years and years. More insulin gets pumped into the blood, but they can't do the work no more. As a result, you have more glucose floating around in your bloodstream. And then, we call that pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. But I tell you, this is such an easy fix. If the doctor tells you, oh, you're pre-diabetic or you have type 2 diabetes and they want to give you a drug, I did at least 1,000 times with people, even on my own dad. I turned it around in like 3 to 4 weeks. And you can do that with your blood test. All you have to do is, obviously, cut the carbs, cut the sugar, and then there's a few supplements, of course, to help with the metabolism. And I know it's easier said than done because remember, sugar is, addictive. It hits the dopamine, receptors in the same way as a drug. So that's why it's easier said than done. However, and that's why professionals comes in, because we guide you through all that. However, if you're able to do it, do a little bit of fasting, low carbs, cut the sugar, and 4 weeks later, go and do another blood test with the doctor, and you'll be astounded what's happening. It's going to go down. And then also, it increases the visceral fat, the fat between our organs, which acts like a cushion. However, I'm sure you've seen people that have like a belly. They're skinny, but they have a belly. That's because they have that internal fat between the organs. It starts growing. Well, it can't go anywhere because it's packed in the rib cage, so it has to come out. It can also be inflammation, parasites, all that stuff. And then it disrupts your gut microbiome. Yeah, that's an interesting one too. For better explanation, let's just say there's the good ones and there's the bad ones, right? Depending on what you have been eating in the last 10 years or so, you can have an overgrowth of the good ones or the bad ones. The good ones like the whole foods, the fibers and everything, and the bad ones like the sugar, the candida, the yeast and all that stuff. Oh, they love it. They, and this is not an analogy, they directly communicate with the brain through the spinal cord. And for the longest, we didn't even know that. When you have some sort of craving, right, that's actually your gut bacteria, signals to the brain. Hey, who's the pizza? Oh, I'm craving sugar. Oh my God, I want a donut. I crave a donut. I'm not lying to you. I cannot remember the last time I had food cravings. It doesn't exist in my life. I don't even know what that means because I eat so nutritious. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but nearly perfect. And the almost supplements, I eat super nutritious. The gut relationship is kind of like a marriage. You keep the wife happy, and the wife leaves you alone. Oh boy, if you don't keep the wife happy, you're gonna get a lot of shit. And and your gut bacteria, as funny as it sounds, but your gut bacteria, works the same way. That's the relationship we have with them. And when you have any kind of cravings or sugar cravings, that's actually a sign of food addiction. But like any addiction, there's always ways out. And then we have, this is my favorite. It depletes the key nutrients. Okay, let's talk about Christmas because it's coming up soon. Why do you think around Christmas people get sick? Does anybody know? Well, because it's in the topic, obviously. But my mom used to tell me, oh, we all get sick, it's because it's cold outside, right? But then later I found out I'm going to cold plunge, almost every day. And I'm like, didn't my mom say that the cold gets me sick? I'm actually getting healthier and I feel better. Something doesn't make sense. Well, it's actually not the cold, it's not the temperature, it's the sugar. So around the holidays, when we eat sugar every day, like people that normally don't eat sugar every day do it because of family and everything, right? But what happens is, when you consume sugar, you impair your immune system by about 35 to 45%, depending on the study you read, for 5 to 7 hours. Let me repeat that. Whenever you eat sugar or you drink not Diet Coke, a regular Coke, or any kind of juice, your immune system is compromised for 5 to 6 hours or 7 hours. At the same time, the sugar depletes the very nutrients you need, for the immune system, the magnesium, the B vitamins, the chromium. And here what's happening. You go in the gym, your immune system is compromised because you're consuming sugar every day. And then any kind of diseased microorganism, whatever, bacteria, virus comes along and hits you. Usually your body would fight it off. But now because you're consuming so much sugar, you get sick much, much easier. When you have the flu, never, ever eat sugar because you just make it worse. And why do you think, when you have a flu, when you're sick, you're not hungry? Because the body knows that in order to heal you, you need to be in a fasted state. The biggest stressor we put on our body every single day is digesting food. It takes a lot of energy to digest food. So if you're sick and the body needs all the energy to heal you, and then you keep eating, like my mom always tells me, oh, you gotta eat that you get healthier. No, it's quite the opposite. Listen to your body. There's a reason why you are not hungry. The body turns off the ghrelin hormone so you don't eat, so the body can heal. So don't force yourself. And then another interesting one. How come the sugar raises your triglycerides, your LDL, and your cholesterol? You go to a doctor, you get your blood test, and and the doctor tells you, oh, you have high LDL, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, and you're like, but I'm not eating any fat. Doesn't make any sense. Well, it's not the fat, it's the sugar. And an easy explanation is like this. Like we said before, the body is like a glucose burning machine, right? And so if you eat a lot of high glycemic carbs, a lot of sugar, throughout the day, every day, then the body is always focused on burning the glucose. Now, when we eat, we always eat proteins and fat, fats and everything. And fat is not bad. It only gets bad when it gets mixed with high glycemic carbs or sugar. And here's why. The fat has to go somewhere. If the body is always occupied with burning, the sugar, remember the favorite ice cream, the chocolate, right? And you eat protein and fat. The fat has to go somewhere. Well, it gets stored into the liver. It gets stored into the waistline, and it's also floating around in the bloodstream. And then you go to the doctor and you have the shock, and the doctor tells you, oh, you gotta eat less fat and everything. No, all you have to do, and you don't have to believe me, you can try it out yourself. You don't have to tell me about your blood test, but just try it out with the information I just gave you. For like 1 month or 2 months, I mean, depending on where you start, stop eating sugar, do a little bit of fasting, and eat low carbs. And then you go for another blood test, and then you tell me what your triglycerides and your LDL and your cholesterol is, because you need to give the body the chance to use that fat as fuel. When you always eat, consume a lot of sugar, and the body's occupied burning that, and the fat starts accumulating, do some fasting, intermittent fasting, low calories, whatever, but cut the carbs. That's why low carb diets and stuff work so well. However, you need to give the body the chance to use the fat and burn it. If the body is always occupied burning the glucose, you never give it a chance to burn that. But the minute you don't have any carbs, you do a little bit of fasting and a little bit of working out or cardio, now the body is forced to use the fat as fuel. You want to take the fat out from the liver, because if you don't, eventually you can end up with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And then you're going to lose weight because the body's going to use the emergency battery, burn that fat. And then, of course, that the fat that flows around in the bloodstream also gets taken out and gets burned, because the body has no choice. That's all that's here. But remember, when you present both, body will always go for glucose. And then, we already talked about this. Yeah, and it feeds cancer cells. We know that the sugar feeds cancer cells. I can actually give you a story. I mentioned it last week. Well, now it's been 3 weeks. Last week when I told the story, it was 2 weeks. A friend called me 3 weeks ago and told me, hey, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, his son is, cancer. He's 22 years old. He's in Beverly Hills in the hospital. Can you help him? I'm like, well, I wish you would have given me more information, and a little bit more time if you're in the hospital. So anyways, I said, yeah, let me talk to him. Yeah, it didn't take long. He called me right away. So I asked him, so I don't know nothing about it. And I even told him, said, look, you're not my patient. I'm not allowed to give you any information, but just because my friend referred me, okay, tell me what's going on. So he explained everything. He said, well, he's 20 years old. He got cancer, stage 4. He's in Beverly Hills Hospital, and he's been doing a little bit better. We've been giving him ice cream every day to build his strength. I'm like, whoa, what did you just say? I said, you give him ice cream, he has cancer in the hospital. I said, didn't the doctors tell you that it feeds cancer cells like 8 times faster? And I wish I wouldn't have said that, because I told him, you're literally killing him by giving him sugar. The very next day, he passed away. So that's the one thing I regret. But I even stayed up like till 10 o'clock. Doesn't sound much, but anybody that knows me, I go to bed at like 8:30 or 9. And so I helped him to write everything down. I sent it to him. And I was wondering why I didn't hear back from him. And then 2 days later, my other friend who referred me, he called me and said, hey, he passed away. I'm like, well, no wonder I didn't hear from him. And I wish I wouldn't have said that. And then also, we need to mention that it causes those energy crashes and the mood swings. So how many times, especially if we work in the office with people, they eat the donut and they drink the Coke or whatever, and then they're happy, and then 30 minutes later, their mood is down. That's because of the sugar crashes, up, down, up, down. Dopamine released, dopamine goes down. We're going to get to this point now. When you do a line of Coke, I'm not saying you did or anything, but hypothetically, it releases a dopamine, right? You feel good, and then 34 minutes later, you're down, you need another one. Sugar is the same thing. There's even been a study that has shown that sugar is 8 times more addictive. That was a great example, huh? Sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And there was a study with mice. They locked up 20 mice in a cage with sugar water, 20 mice in a cage with cocaine water. They left them in there for a while to get them hooked. And then they put them all in one cage with both options. And guess what happened? only one mouse went for the cocaine water. The rest went for the sugar water. And that should tell you something. Now, the only difference is sugar is widely accepted. Cocaine, not so much. Well, I guess it depends where you live. Yeah, we already talked about this, that it promotes fatty liver disease. And also, like, it's a hormone disruptor too. I don't even want to talk about estrogen and testosterone anymore, but cortisol. If you eat sugar late in the evening or before you go to bed, you might have noticed, I can't sleep. I don't know, I have insomnia. I don't know what's going on. Well, sugar can raise your cortisol. Cortisol is the hormone that gets released, that wakes you up in the morning. It's high in the morning, to get you out of bed. And then throughout the day, it tapers down. However, if you eat a lot of sugar, it can actually raise it even at night, because it can mimic like, oh, it's daylight, let's go. And then good luck sleeping. And look at the picture. Like, how easy is it to get to 100 grams a day? I mean, this one I haven't counted, but this looks like 15, 20. And how easy is it to drink like 2 or 3 of those, and then you eat? It's so easy. When you drink it, you don't even feel it. It doesn't keep you satiated or anything. But it's happening internally. So, and those are my key takeaways why I say sugar is not for human consumption, or at least not the amount of sugar. And when we talk about fruits and everything, right, it's different because they're packed in fibers, which slows down the breakdown of the glucose, which means your insulin doesn't shoot up, like that. But if you eat or drink, pure sugar, it shoots up. It's like a heartbeat. And then soon the heartbeat stops. Yeah, so what's the takeaway? So what we eat isn't just calories, it's information for your cells. And also, it's important, like, what the body can do with the calories. I'm sure you know at least one person that are skinny and they can eat anything they want, they don't gain any weight. You look at them like, and that's because their body is more efficient in processing the calories. And they also might have a really healthy gut, which also has something to do with that. Okay, so what's the takeaway? Processed food causes inflammation, hormone disruption, causes disease, and speeds up the aging process. Real food, whole foods, organic food, which we're going to talk about now, builds muscle, improves health, strengthens your immune system, and as a result, you get longevity. All right. So when it comes to protein is not just protein. The quality really matters. All proteins are not equal. And especially for the aging population when it comes to building muscles. That's what it really comes down to. Another reason is why adults need, more protein than young individuals is because as we get older, we get anabolic resistance. And so we have to consume more, and that's where we need the strength training on top of that, so it goes to the right places. Anybody here eats grass-fed, organic every day? How many people think that grass-fed, pasture-raised, farm-raised, conventional, it's all the same? Anybody? All right, so let's talk about the grass-fed first. I mean, you will get a good idea. So grass-fed means, this is the paradox. Grass-fed means that the last 6 months before they get slaughtered, they feed them with grass. Grass-finished means, and by the way, which is hard to find, that means, supposedly, if you can trust them, they feed them with grass, all their life. So the diet consists of pasture-raised natural grasses and herbs. And as a result, because the animals eat what they're supposed to eat, they give you the high omega-3 fatty acids. Those are the fatty acids you want. And they also give you CLA, which is also a fatty acid, which we even give to people, to burn fat, because CLA, you can buy it in supplement form. It helps to metabolize, fat. So it actually is good, for weight loss too. And yeah, you have 3 times more of CLA in grass fat. There's no antibiotics, there's no hormones, and there's no glyphosate in GMOs and pesticides. And as a result, you get the muscle building nutrients such as the creatine, the carnitine, the zinc, the selenium, vitamin E, B12. Those are the vitamins we need to build muscles, which, by the way, you have very little of that when it comes to conventional. And they're usually leaner, grass-fed are leaner. However, the fat from the grass fat is actually the fat you want to consume because it's the omega-3 and the CLA and stuff like that. That's the fat you want. When it comes to fat, you have really healthy ones and you have really bad ones. And if it's from grass fat, those are the healthy ones. And then just to compare the conventional, the grain fat one, the diet consists of corn, soy, wheat byproducts, sometimes animal waste, and candies. Again, you try to escape the wheat product, you try to escape the glyphosate, all the food chemicals, and now indirectly, not even knowing, you get exposed to that through meat. There's even been some cases if somebody has celiac disease or sensitive to gluten, and they were consuming conventional grain fat. I think it happened with a fish, with a farmer's fish. They had an outbreak of gluten because they feed them with all the pellets, which has all the crap in there. And as a result, because they don't eat what they're supposed to eat, of course, you get low quality omega-3 fatty acids, very little, and you get high omega-6, the very fatty acids you're trying to escape. And they're all pro-inflammatory. And then the CLA, maybe a little bit, but almost non-existent. And here's the dangerous part. Growth hormone and antibiotics. Remember we talked about cancer, right? The glyphosates, all the pesticides, the sugar, and now you eat conventional meat and you have the growth hormone. God forbid, if you have a cancer cell growing, I mean, we have cancer cells growing almost every day, but our immune system is fighting off. But if you should have one growing, and you consume your processed food, your sugar and everything, and then who would think of that? Conventional meat. Your cancer will explode. That's also like a reason why we have 2 million new cases every single year. And we don't have it in Europe or other countries. And that's what I'm trying to point out here with this presentation. There is a reason why, America has the title as the sickest country in the world. And every single year we get sicker. But then, we have the best medical system, we have the best medicine, and we spend more and more money. And unless we make some serious changes, it's not going to stop. And then again, you get exposed again to the GMO grains, the glyphosate, the pesticides, and they have way less of those muscle-building, nutrients like the creatine, the carnitine. And as a result, they have more fat, which people like. They like fatty steaks. However, you're going to get the fat that has omega-6 fatty acids. Also keep in mind, toxins, such as the pesticides, the glyphosate and all that stuff, get stored in fat. Like toxins get stored in the fat. So if the animal gets exposed to a lot of toxins, which these do because of what they consume, it ends up in the fat. And then if you eat the meat, you also eat the toxins. And then on top of that, they're confined. They don't even see the sunlight. They treat them like I would never ever eat grain-fed beef. Once in a while, if you go to a restaurant, different story. But on weekly basis or daily basis, no freaking way. I'd rather eat nothing, or chicken or something. Now, looks good, huh? Now the same principle, the same principle goes with the eggs. You have the pasture-raised organic eggs and the regular. What's the difference? A dozen costs like $8, and the other dozen costs like $2 or $3. But here's the difference. Again, if they're pasture-raised, they eat the grass, the bugs, the seed, the worms, the organic fat. There's no pesticides, no GMO. They run around outdoors. There's no stress, natural behavior. They get exposed to the sun. As a result, you get the good stuff. You get 3 times more omega-3 fatty acids, which you want. The anti-inflammatory, and you get the vitamin D, the E, the B12, the A, and the choline. And by the way, choline is very important for healthy methylation. And there's no antibiotics and no hormones. And there's no glyphosate or pesticides unless they spray the grass, which I doubt. And you can actually recognize them. They're like deep orange yolk. I have a picture on the next slide. The deep orange yolk shows you they have more carotenoids. Carotenoids are very good for your eyesight. They can even protect you from blue light. And regular conventional eggs don't have it. Let me show you a picture here, so you can see the difference. Like, if you have an egg like that, for sure it costs at least $10. But they're outdoor. They ate the natural fat and the insects and the worms. If you see this, any dozens of eggs you buy for like $2-3, they look like this. Like, forget about it. There's nothing healthy in there, and you get exposed to the pesticides and everything. Then you have the mixed green. A lot of times you see these, even like if you buy the expensive ones, but at least they have some sunlight exposure, which means they get the vitamin D and everything. Oh, by the way, you don't have to write everything down. I actually record everything, and everybody that's here today, you're gonna get a copy and I send it to you.
Okay, let me ask on the eggs. What if they are out of doors, but they're being fed with fruit instead of being running around?
Well, again, it all depends on what you feed them with. If you feed them like the conventional stuff, the processed stuff we eat, then yeah, you're back to zero. I mean, it always comes down to the same. Yes, I get it. We want to save some money. It's like a little bit cheaper, but I can promise you, you might save a little bit of money, when you buy conventional, but I promise you, on the long run, you're gonna pay the price. You're gonna pay the hospital, big pharma. You will. I mean, it's impossible. It's almost like, okay, your body is a Ferrari. If you have a Ferrari, would you spend the cheap gas, everything cheap, to keep the Ferrari going? Of course not, because the car is going to break down and it's going to cost a lot of money because you have to replace some parts and everything. You want to maintain it. What's up with your Ferrari? Why are we not doing it? Why are we not doing it? We're treating our car better than ourselves. And yeah, keep that in mind. Treat your body like you would treat your Ferrari. Because at the end of the day, that's all we have. If this vehicle breaks down, we have to wait till we come back in different form. Yeah, so again, conventional, it goes back to the same. That diet consists of the corn, the soy, the grain-based fat, the GMOs, the glyphosate. They're confined in cages indoors. There's no sunlight. As a result, they have less vitamin D, very low in omega-3, and the high in omega-6 fatty acids, so the ones we try to escape. And again, you get exposed to the antibiotics. There's higher residues of the chemicals, and you get the inflammatory fats, the fats you're trying to escape. We're almost done. And the same goes for the wild caught, farm raised. I think you get the point, right? It's like a few bucks more, and they get fed what they're supposed to eat. If they eat God-given food, if all creatures would eat what they're meant to eat, I mean, I only can give you example with dogs, of course, depending on the owners, but it's so rare that dogs get sick if you feed them right. I mean, my last dog was 13 years old, a Frenchie. Yes, at the end she got paralyzed for other issues, but she was never sick. Like, I'm talking about sick like a flu or something like that, right? It's so rare. But the minute you start, giving them candies and sugar, now dogs have diabetes. I mean, are you kidding me? The dogs now have heart attacks and cancer. I mean, do you think that's natural? No, it all comes back to this. You put the wrong gas in your car, it's going to break down. It's the same with you. And the wild caught, right? So again, if they're wild caught, they eat their natural prey, the small fish, the krill, the plankton, everything they were supposed to eat. As a result, you get the best omega-3. I will recommend, unless you're allergic, omega-3 EPA DHA is the best omega-3 fatty acids you can get. They're highly inflammatory. They're good for your brain, even for healing the gut. It's one of the best. I make sure if you buy one that's wild caught, spend the $5 more and get the real stuff. And there's no exposure to toxins. the ratio, omega-3 to omega-6 is like 3 to 1 or 5 to 1, so very little omega-6. The quality is highly bioavailable, and there's no chemicals and hormones. And again, the farmers ones, they get fat with the pellets that are made from soybean, the rapeseed meal, the corn, the gluten, poultry products. Believe it or not, all the leftovers from the chicken, all the poultries we don't eat, they grind it up in a powder, put some, dyed fish meal and everything in there, and they feed it to the fish. And then you consume that again. So it's this chain reaction, right? Whatever the fish is eating eventually ends up in your stomach. And if you only do it like once or twice, sure. But we're doing it, every day, years after years after years. And we call that a toxic accumulation in the body. You get to a point that, did anybody hear about there's actually a great book. It's called The Rain Barrel Effect. The rain barrel is basically, as an analogy, when a baby is born, right, the rain barrel is empty. But the minute the baby is alive, starts eating, breathing, in the environment, a few drops of water are coming into the, rain barrel. And eventually the rain barrel is going to fill up. And unless we detox or we're really careful what we eat, that's when all the diseases come. When that rain barrel is full or gets near to the top, that's when we get diseases, of any kind. And so in Ayurveda medicine, they actually focus on emptying that barrel. They don't even focus. It doesn't matter if you come to them with cancer, with heart disease, with eczema, or anything. That's just a symptom. But all symptoms go back to a few root causes. And how many times did you hear? This is like the most common excuse when people say, "Oh, when I was young, I was eating this, I was doing that, I got away with it, but now it's just age." Bullshit, it's age. It's because of the toxic load. The reason why you get away when you're young is because your toxic load is low. So you have to do a lot of stuff, to actually fill it up before you see, side effects and health issues. Depending on your lifestyle, depending on the choices you make, you're going to fill it up sooner or later. But eventually, if you don't take care of it, it will fill up. And that's when diseases and health issues are coming. And and so that's why it's important to always do detoxes, gut detox, liver detox, parasite oh my God. Anybody has done a parasite detox here? Nobody? Everybody has parasites. Everybody has plastics. Everybody has heavy metals. Like, those are just a few things to mention. This is part of the toxic load that's increasing. Every time you clean your table, your air freshener, you're in the toilet and you spray after you finish. All that are toxins that go into your system. When I talk about a toxic load, I'm talking about everything we're exposed to, even the air freshener in your car. And and so we have to lower our toxic load. When the toxic load is low, the body can heal itself from anything. How many times did you hear those, "Oh my God, it's a miracle, the person healed himself from like cancer. I don't know how. Oh, it's impossible," right? Well, it's not so impossible, because when you empty the barrel and then you add the ingredients which the body needs to heal, the body can heal itself from everything. And if you go online, there's documentaries and everything, you can read about that. And the reason why is because of the toxic load. And if you consume the wrong food, our toxic load is going up and up and up. And then they get exposed, again, antibiotics, antifungal, artificial coloring. Do you know that the salmon doesn't even have any color? That's actually added color. They're actually white. They try to mimic the wild caught, which is red. And again, you get exposed to the microplastic, dioxins, and pesticides. As a result, you get the omega-6 fatty acids, low quality, low essential amino acids, and heavy metal exposure, such as mercury and cadmium. Oh, I can't talk anymore. And the same goes for protein. Go for the grass-fed organic whey protein. It goes back to the same. You get the full essential amino acids. they're high in leucine, which is a key amino acid to stimulate protein synthesis. This entire clinic is about building muscles, right? Well, you're not going to build anything if you don't have the essential amino acids. Leucine directly activates protein synthesis. In other words, it builds muscles. If you don't have those, in your diet, then you're going to waste a lot of time here.
How do you feel about Orgain?
Which one?
How do you feel about Orgain?
Orgain.
It's organic.
Yeah, I know of it. Yeah, I can't remember everything that's in there, but as long as it's non-GMO and organic, and tested for heavy metals, then you're in good shoes. I actually talk about the organic vegan protein, after this, which is the same thing. Especially when it comes to plant protein, make sure it's non-GMO, no pesticides, it's tested. Yeah, otherwise no matter what choices you make, you will always get exposed to all those food chemicals and the pesticides, even from the protein, from the fish, from everything. So it is so important. Spend the extra $2-3. It will pay off in the long run. I mean, and again, the whey protein is fast absorbing, so it's really good. So it's really good after a workout. It's rich in immunoglobulin and lactoferrin, supports the immune system, and the bioavailability is much, much higher. And you consume less to get the same amount, to build muscles rather than the plant-based one, which we talk about now. Yeah, and then if you a big fan of plant-based, which is fine too, but then again, make sure you look out for the organic, non-GMO, because remember, 90% of all the crops are GMO. So, and most of them are made out of the soy, the quinoa, the buckwheat, the hemp, the pea, chia, and the spirulina. By the way, spirulina is one of the most nutritious plant on Earth. It has everything: vitamins, minerals, proteins, everything. Doesn't taste as good, but it's one of the best things you can consume. Yeah, the only downside is, it has less leucine, which means it doesn't stimulate muscle growth as much as the whey protein. And the absorption is also slower, so it's not great if you consume it after workout, but you still can do it. And it requires 30 to 40% more of total protein intake to get to the same amount of amino acids to get from the whey protein. Okay, now this is the last part, some longevity tips. How to get to 100 and 120 years. Now we still laugh about it, but you will see that everybody in their 20s now, for them, when they get to the point, 120, 110 will be completely normal. An average lifespan now is like what, 75, 78. The new average lifespan will be 100, 110, 105, 100%. All right, so let's go over it really quick. So prioritize the protein, right? So aim for at least 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound. So if you're 100 pounds, you can consume somewhere between 100 or 120 or 150 grams. Now, how many times did you hear that? Oh my God, I can eat so much protein. So you cannot eat like 120, 150 grams of protein, but you can eat like a pack of chips. Yeah, because it's much easier. We know that now. However, the problem is, the thing about this, your hand, right? Put that on a plate. That should be the size of your protein, whether it's chicken, fish, whatever. This is approximately, 6 to 7 ounces, which gives you about 50 to 60 grams of protein. So you can eat 2 of those. It doesn't take much, with a little bit of salad or something on the side, and then 1 protein shake, and you're already up to 150 grams of protein. It's not that difficult. And then strength training, at least 2 or 3 times to maintain, even like a bone density. I have one client, he's 92 years old, and 3 weeks ago, he fell face down, and he didn't break a thing. And I was joking, I said to him, did you just want to check to see if you waste your money, to see if it's working? Because the doctor said, oh, this is like unbelievable. I said, sure, I'm sure you got lucky. I mean, he was like all like, bloody here and everything. I didn't break anything at 92. But he's been working out for 15 years and eats everything organic. like super healthy. Sure, there's a little bit of luck to that, but he worked for that luck to happen. Because I can tell you, if he wouldn't have done all that stuff, he would have broke something. With 92 years old, and then walk every day, 7,000, 10,000 steps. I don't even know we came up with 10,000 steps. Just walk around for like 30 minutes to an hour. Who cares how many steps? If it's hot outside, go to a gym or do like treadmill or anything. And also, I can give you a little longevity tip. After you eat, how many of you eat and then just sit down and watch TV? Anybody? Nobody. All right. So, what you actually can do is, whenever you eat, go for a little walk, or even do like a few, squats or anything, because that will actually help you to lower the blood glucose, and it also helps to improve insulin sensitivity. And also you speed up the metabolism so you can actually digest the food quicker. And then sleeping. If you would ask me what is the most important thing that doesn't cost me anything, I would say sleep. Because all the magic happens when you sleep at night, right? That's when the body repairs. That's when the body releases HGH, the human growth hormone, which helps you to recover, to build muscles. And the body also goes through a detoxification, process, such as the brain detox. Did you know your liver has its own circadian rhythm from like 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock? So if you're not asleep, deep asleep by 11 o'clock, or let's say between 11 and 3, your liver will not regenerate like the way it's supposed to, because you go against your circadian rhythm. That's why it's so important to go with the circadian rhythm. It's getting dark, go to sleep. Getting light, get up. And we have been doing this for thousands of years. And then, and also important, make sure the room is cool. I know it's kind of tough today, but like 67, 68 has actually shown the best sleep. Dark. Make sure the room is dark. Like my room is so dark I can't even see my own hand in front of me. That's what it helps. You get a good sleep. And then avoid screen time. And if you have to, there's those blue glasses, that block it out. And remember what I said about the egg yolk, the orange, the carotenoid, actually helps with that too, with the blue light. And then, and then very common, like, I mean, if I haven't convinced you to eat organic and stay away from ultra processed food and sugar, then I don't know what else to say. Like real food, eat organic. That doesn't mean you have to do it every single day, but even small changes go a long way. Eat organic food, pasture raised, wild caught. Spend the extra $2-3. It's not that much more, but it's worth it at the end, trust me. And stay away from ultra processed food, because it will cause inflammation and chronic diseases. I mean, the data speaks for itself. You don't have to believe anything I say today. Just look at the data and then look at what we eat. And nobody can explain it. And the doctors just, give you medication. This is actually interesting when it comes to medication. Did you know that our plants have a better healthcare system than us humans? Okay, as an analogy, imagine you have an expensive rare plant at home, right? And all of a sudden, the leaves are turning brown. And look, oh my God, the plant costed me $2,000. It's like, it's dying. It's like, I don't know what to do. Oh, I have to call a plant pathologist trying to help me, right? What do you think the pathologist is going to do? Do you think it's going to go and try to rescue the leaf, which is just a symptom, right? Isn't it funny that when it comes to plants, we actually know the leaf is just a symptom? It's actually down in the roots, in the soil. They never focus on the symptom, the leaf. They go down to the root cause. They, check the soil to see if there's any, nitrogen or anything like missing. Then they address the issue, and guess what? The leaf starts turning green again. Humans, we do the opposite. Well, there's also a reason that it's a money-making machine, right? We have so many drugs for every symptom, every leaf, but there are only a few root causes. And when you study Ayurveda medicine, where all the root causes, are basically based on the toxic load, they empty the barrel. They have the highest, they have the highest records in healing. It's the oldest medicines, like 6,000 years old. And, I kind of like studying it. I wish there would be a class I could take here. You actually have to go and fly out there for practicum. But they actually, I mean, the book I was reading was mind blowing. People from all over the world, go there. There's a waiting list. People with cancer, heart disease, like any kind of health issues. And then after like 3 months or so, without any medication, they walk home. Oh, I'm healed. I'm like really healed, not just covering the symptom. And so, yeah, our plants do have a better healthcare system. And what's the next? And then hydrate. Drink a lot of water, especially here in Arizona. And make sure the water, again, don't drink the tap water. Make sure it's high quality water. And avoid a sugary drink. Sugary drink doesn't do anything. I wish I could tell you one positive thing, but there's zero. If you have to eat sugar, in a cookie and a donut, or at least you get a flavor or something. But drinking that doesn't do anything. It doesn't even make you full or anything. As a matter of fact, when you consume sugar, you're gonna eat more afterwards. Not too long ago, I was at a friend's birthday party, and they had a bunch of donuts on the table. In front of everybody, he put $100 on the table. Dave, eat the donut, I'll give you $100. And everybody's like, and I'm like, nope, I'm not eating it. And everybody's like, what the heck? And I'm like, nope. He already started laughing because he already knew. He put $200 on it. Eat the donut, $200 is yours. Everybody, I do it. No, only Dave. And I'm like, nope, it's not worth it. And then people come up to me, it's like, why? It's like $200 for a donut? It's only like a 20 calories. I said, look, it's not the calories. It's what happens after you consume that, because you're gonna cause a chain reaction. There's an old saying like, you can't miss it if you don't know what you miss, right? But once you know what you miss, it can cause a chain reaction. And also once, what happens is the glucose, the sugar, glucose shoots up. Everything goes up and it has to come down. And when it comes down, that's when you get, oh my God, I'm craving. Or like when you feel dizzy, or how many times do you feel that numbness in the lip and stuff, and they need some sugar and you feel good again. That's because of the sugar drops. You consume sugar, you will end up double the calories that day. Every time you consume sugar, you will add more food because of the sugar drops. So it's not just the sugar and the calories, it's the chain reaction that happens within the body. Because if you eat anything with sugar, you're gonna eat more afterwards in the next 6-7 hours. And then manage stress. Practice breathing, prayers, gratitude, connect with loved ones. And this is an interesting one too, sunlight. Daily morning sun. If you're afraid of the harmful UV radiation, the first 45 minutes in the morning, there's no harmful UV radiation. That's a good way. Or like in the evening sun, do not avoid the sun. I don't even know where it came from, where, oh, sun causes cancer, sun is so bad for you. Again, this is one of those things where I even say, don't believe me or anybody, just go back in history. We didn't have a sunscreen 100 years ago, 200 years ago, thousands of years ago. Did we all die on skin cancer? No. Skin cancer actually started like more like in the 80s. And what started in the 80s? Those chemical sunscreens. And just last year, there was another recall on a sunscreen because there's cancer-causing chemicals. Every year you hear that. Like, don't believe me, Google it. It's all there. And yeah, I mean, sun gives you life. Without sun, we wouldn't even be here. I left Austria because I don't see the sun. I have winter depression. You guys don't even know how happy or how good you have it here to see the blue sky and to see the sun. I dare you to go a year away where you don't see the sun. And then you tell me how you feel. And so don't avoid the sun, because sun boosts your mood. When you go in the sun and go on the beach, you're going to feel great afterwards. It actually helps with your methylation, with your circadian rhythm. And obviously, how important must vitamin D be for you if the body can synthesize it through the sun? It's the most important nutrient for the human body. Otherwise, it couldn't make it on its own. Yeah, and then it also helps you with reduced blood pressure and stress. Yeah, a little bit in the sun. I'm not saying get burned. That's when DNA damage occurs. And it also doesn't make any sense if you put like sunscreen on it, because it only helps if the sun hits the skin. Otherwise, you're back to zero. And then maintain purpose. When it comes to anti-aging, what we teach people is 80% is epigenetics. Has anybody heard about epigenetics? 20% of your genome is set in stone, right? That determines how tall you are, your hair color, your eye color, and so on. But we found out that 80% is epigenetics. And that responds to nutrition, lifestyle, love, community, having a purpose in life, having a positive outlook in life. When you study centenarians in all the blue zones, what they all have in common is they all have a great community. They all have a great social life. They always have, if you go to Italy or where I'm from, the elderly people, they meet up outside, they sit on the bench, like, and gasping about everybody and complaining and everything, but whatever, it gives them a purpose, right? and then they play, chess or play games, and that alone, believe it or not, has an impact on your genome, on those 80%. And also, like, fitness, moving, eating the right things, nutrition. So that means 80% of how fast you're going to age and how fast you're going to get age-related diseases is really in your hands. And that's why longevity and anti-aging, we know it works, because we can tap into the 80% and influence that. But, going to church or like being around a loved one, when people die quick, how many times did you hear that? There are a couple that are both 95 years old, and all of a sudden one of the, either he or her, die. And then 2 weeks later, the other partner dies too. You know why? It's because of the epigenetics. When you don't have no purpose no more, right? Because all your friends are gone, or your loved one is gone, and maybe you have kids or not. Some people do, some people don't. And you're here by yourself. You're like, I don't know what to do no more. I have no purpose. And boom, and then you're gone too. We called it the broken heart syndrome, but really, in technical terms, it comes down to the epigenetics. That's why it's so important to always create a need. Create a need, like create a purpose. If you have no purpose, that's when things go down quick. And that's what all the centenarians and the blue zones all have in common. They all have communities, they all have a purpose. Even if their loved ones passed away, they still have their friends. And they're all like 90, 100, 105 years old, and still like sitting outside and complaining about everybody else. Yeah, and then avoid toxins. When we talk about toxins, it's not just the pesticides, the plastic, the smoke, and alcohol, and the pollutants. It's also the cleaning supply, the air freshener, all that kind of stuff, because all that will fill up your toxic load. And when the toxic load gets close to the top, the body cannot repair itself anymore. And and then keep your brain active, like learn new skills every day, read, do puzzles. I made myself a goal 5 years ago that every single day I have to learn something new. Whether you read or whether you write a book or whether you listen to a podcast or anything. And I think for like 90% of the time I kept up, with that promise. Yeah, and that's it, and so longevity is not just living long, it's living strong and healthy and happy. And keep in mind, small changes make a big difference when it comes to health and longevity. All right, thank you. And if anybody has any questions, now's the...
Where do you go to get grass-fed meat?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Well, you can actually buy it online. It's called... Do you remember that? Something pasture-raised, right? Yeah, and they say that they don't use vaccines. It's pasture-raised. It's grass-fed. Sprouts also has some, and Whole Foods. Yeah, I mean fries and stuff like that. They don't have nothing, no. More like in the more like health stores, like Sprouts, Whole Foods, you get some. I hope you tell the truth, because just yesterday I found out. I was reading a report. There's so much fraud when it comes to organic, just to make money, and a lot of that comes from outside of the United States, so it's hard to control. I'm like, man, it's so hard today to keep yourself, in good shape and keep healthy. I mean, I know this was like a lot, right? It was like mind blowing, right? But this was just a part of everything, right? But again, it really comes down to making the right choices. It's like, is it really organic? I mean, I guess it depends. Maybe you build a relationship with farmers market with real farmers, or if you have your own yard, grow your own. Um, yeah, I don't know what to tell you when it comes to that, but I mean, I sometimes order it, sometimes I get it from Whole Foods and from Sprouts, and I always ask them, is it 100% grass fed? Does it mean the entire life? And they're like, yo, yo, yo. And I always threaten them, well, I'm going to take a piece and I'm going to send it in the lab. And if I find pesticides, I'm going to sue you guys. Now, that actually happened a lot of times. Whole Foods got sued quite a few times. Look it up, because they found hormones, in organic, beef.
Anybody that's in attendance today too, if you see me up front, you can just get some information. I'll follow up with you later. Get a free consultation and also do a free scan for you to see what's going on inside the body. And then do you have your contact information? Well, also, if you give me your information, we'll send a copy of the slides and the video and David's contact information.
Yeah, we're gonna send you guys an email with the recording, and I can also add the slides too, so you can look it up. So that's what we're saying. You don't have to write everything down. Yeah, and then if you need any help, reach out anytime. Do free consultations. Yeah, and then we go from there. But yeah.